This is Mike Criscione. I'm a producer of Bloodsport 2, and I also, on the set we didn't have a real director, although a guy got a credit for it, and I actually was the guy that directed Bloodsport 2 the most. I'm leaving Justin Ray Harvey to answer any questions he wants, and I'll give him a little bit of the backstory.
Absolutely, Mike, and I'd like to say this is a dream come true for me, and welcome to the show. So.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that I'm honored that you asked me to give you a little bit of the backstory on what's your favorite movie of all time and favorite franchise in a way. So go on, my friend.
Absolutely, because I do want to comment that Bloodsport is my favorite film and has been since I was 3 years old. And for the sequel, I didn't think it was a bad sequel at all. I really didn't. I mean, yeah, I was, I will admit I was disappointed with, the fact that it didn't continue with Dukes' story, but I can let you explain that later on in the show. But my first question is, to start out this interview, Mike, is how did you come about to, do this project?
Well, after I saw Bloodsport 1, I was a lot like you. I mean, I was like, wow, this is probably the third karate movie that's ever mattered in history. Billy Jack, I think, really put karate kind of where people go, wow, can people actually do that? And, of course, the Bruce Lee story. And then Frank Dukes accomplished that in Bloodsport. So I was like, wow, I want to go meet this guy because I want to do his next story, Bloodsport 2. In fact, I walked in his office, shook his hand, introduced myself to him, and said, I'm going to do Bloodsport 2. And he goes, well, the rights or stuff were being disputed. And at the same time, Jean-Claude Van Damme was, I would say the right word is dragging everybody along a process, pretending like he was going to lend his name to it. But what he actually did is he ended up going out and filming The Quest in Thailand at the same time we were doing Bloodsport 2, knowing he lost the title to Bloodsport 2. And since Bloodsport really is the story of Frank Dukes, obviously he's the only one that had rights to his story, but we had rights to the title. And we did the best film we could. There was very limited funds. In fact, the guy that financed it was, left us out in Thailand with very little money all the time. So that was like the backstory, how I started producing it, helped in the directing, helped in every part of the production. In fact, there's only a couple people that did everything on the production, and one of them was me.
Wow, and where did all the filming and stuff take place?
We filmed Bloodsport 2 in Thailand, and by the way, I agree with you that I'm disappointed it didn't continue with Frank Dukes in it, and me and Frank over, a long period of time, probably the past 25 years on different times, want to revisit that story and update his own personal story.
Oh, absolutely, because I don't know if you know this, Mike, but there are a lot of rumors and speculations that somebody wants to do a remake of Bloodsport, but I think the problem is I think that there's a agreement with Dukes' lawsuit stating that, they can use the title, but in order to do a real remake, they have to use his character and his story. So.
Right. I wasn't aware of the rumor, but they could do anything they want, but I know Frank's eventually going to tell the whole story, including that part of his life, with the continued part of his life, which I feel will be a much better story. And right now, I'm doing a documentary about that called Secret Weapon. And as you know, Frank also had a guy doing something called Put Your Dukes Up. So there's a lot going on in Frank's life about people feeling right now is probably the right time to do another karate movie.
Absolutely. And Mike, I would like to say if you need any help with the documentary as far as good stories, my story with Dukes is just awesome. I mean, it's amazing. So if you ever need my assistance or my input, I would be happy to accommodate.
Okay, well, good. Well, that's nice to know, and I'm sure we will, and we'll keep each other updated on that.
Oh, absolutely. Now let's talk a little bit about casting. One of the first things I want to mention to you is I'm really glad that you are at least able to get one actor that was previously in Bloodsport, Donald Gibb.
Yes, and he was a pleasure to work with. He's an extremely nice guy, and I worked with him on other films afterwards. And in each case, I would consider Don Gibb a good movie guy. You've seen him on his national commercial, and he was. I thought he was real good in Bloodsport too, and like you said, I'm glad we got him too. And there's other good actors in our movie. I mean, Pat Moretta, who you know, did the Karate Kid. I thought played a real nice role. And James Hong, who's probably done over 400 movies, including with Jack Nicholson and all kinds of other stuff. And so with the limited resources we have had to make that movie, there was an extreme profit on the name, although I think they ruined the franchise with Stories 3 and 4. And you could make a good argument that even 2 was on the way to hurting the franchise because, like you pointed out, and rightfully so, it wasn't based on a Frank Dukes story.
Oh, absolutely. So, but I did like how there was different fighting styles and stuff, and I even thought the music was good for the film. I was surprised that there wasn't a soundtrack.
By the way, Frank saw it just last year for the first time. I showed it to him because he said it was probably too painful to ever look at because, at that time he wrote for Frank Dukes a movie for Van Damme, the movie that turned out to be The Quest, but he was actually the writer of it, and it was called The Return of the Dragon, that Frank wrote a script to, and Van Damme, basically, according to virtually everybody, just stole the script,
Yeah, because actually, I do have The Quest, and you can tell that a lot of ideas was taken from Bloodsport and from Frank. You can
he was basically trying to do Bloodsport 2 by making The Quest without having the title or having the name of Frank Dukes. Of course, The Quest was the way that he started his demise. It's him going downhill after. If he would have stuck with the Bloodsport franchise and stuck with Frank, all their movies were successful. But that's the way things happen,
Yeah, and it's like, I see this new generation that, that love Bloodsport, but at the same time, I would love to see it redone somehow if it's done right, if it's done right.
Yeah, I mean, and by the way, every Bloodsport was low-budget movies that everybody made a lot of profit on, and Frank could give even more insight because I think he'd be the first one to tell you that his hands were tied behind his back a lot, and that they barely touched the story. So I'm sure that's going to be done, and because it's a legendary movie with a legendary person, and I think people got to stop questioning the legends. I mean, once there's a legend about somebody, it's like Bruce Lee. If you saw his movie, it showed him fight 15 or 20 guys probably 7 or 8 times, and I mean, that could be real questionable if you wanted to get into questioning a legend because Bruce Lee was about 110 pounds.
Exactly. I've always said to this day, Mike, if it wasn't for Frank Dukes, there would be no Bloodsport and there would be no Kickboxer. And
yeah, and you're right. That's 100% true. You could even go further than that because he was involved in Double Impact. He was involved in, it was called Wrong Bet, but I forget what the next title was, where the guy did street fighting, and all of them were based on stories Frank told to these guys that they end up shooting. And if you look at the last thing Frank was involved with in Van Damme, you could look at probably there's a curse that went with Van Damme for not taking him with him, you know what I mean? Because his career went down at the same time.
Exactly. I totally agree. And actually, to give my audience something that they may not know, who was all up for the part of Alex Cardell?
Well, what happened when I came on, there's a guy that was financing it, which we found out later had very little finance. In fact, had to get financing during the actual filming, named Alan Moretz, that had a guy that Van Damme pretty much look-alike, called Daniel Bernhardt, and he had him attached to the movie when I got there, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure there ever was casting, you know, other than he attached this guy to the movie. The guy was minimal at best as a martial artist, although we had a guy named Jerry Pennington who's a world champion karate guy that did the choreograph. You know, so we made everybody in it look pretty good. And, you know, like I said, again, with as real as you can with a limited budget.
And I gotta say, y'all did good with the cast of the bad guy Demon. I thought he was pretty good for the part, since y'all couldn't get Bolo Young.
Yeah, and in fact we called Bolo and Bolo, but Bolo knew that his name with that title meant a lot, and they weren't willing to pay Bolo what he wanted for that part. And we actually cast the other guy while we were in Thailand, and he was actually in the Bruce Lee Enter the Dragon movie.
Oh yeah, that's a classic film.
Yeah.
Now that's like I would have loved to seen Bruce Lee and Frank work together on something. That would have been epic, I think.
Yeah, it would have been. That could have very easily happened at the time, you know.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So,
but probably neither one of them knew how big their story would have actually been, or they probably would have got together.
Yeah, because I don't think at the time that Frank really realized how big Bloodsport was going to be. So.
Yeah, and he was going through a lot of things where, you know, it's just like Bruce Lee. I'm sure when he sat down and did his story, that, you know, I mean, one of the main witnesses of that story was Bruce Lee.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And Frank, it's like you know, if you look at your own life, and I look back at my own life, the only person alive that has witnessed my whole life is my dad.
Wow.
So the older you get, and I've known my wife for all but 8 years of my life, so the older you get, the less witnesses you actually have to your life, especially on stuff as secretive as Bloodsport. But I could tell you this. I interviewed a lot of great martial artists for the documentary The Perfect Weapon, and people that stood absolutely nothing, that I, in fact, know were great martial artists, talked about how good Frank was. And I can't see, we weren't paying them nothing. I mean, I don't know why they would say that unless it was true, because, like I said, they had nothing to gain by saying that.
Wow. That's amazing. And also, another brilliant mind that I wanted to give a shout out to is David Worth. He's a good friend of mine now too. Are you familiar with David Worth?
No.
No. Yeah, I mean, Mike, he is a brilliant mind. If you ever get the chance to work with David Worth, take it, my friend, because he's a brilliant mind.
Okay. I'll keep that in mind.
Because he worked on Bloodsport, and then he worked on Kickboxer. He was the director of Kickboxer. So.
Oh, good. How cool.
Yeah, I mean, to me today, Mike, I'm like a little kid in a candy shop, you know, talking Bloodsport and martial arts, you know. So this is great. This is just awesome. So,
wow, great.
So, is there anything that you can tell me about the film that maybe people don't know?
About the film?
Yeah, about the film.
Well, like I said, they had a director. They had a director attached to it, but he was a guy that did the Power Rangers, and I go, you can't do a Frank Dukes movie, which, I mean, you can't do Bloodsport, which is based on the raw, you know, I mean, it was based on karate terrorizing you, to doing one of these joke movies where they're jumping all around the ring on ropes, on you know what I mean, on strings and stuff.
Yeah.
I go, that would just kill Bloodsport. That's the worst idea in the world, and this guy that wants to do all that stuff, you're really making a big mistake. So I talked Alan Merez out of having this guy, and I go, why don't you direct it, you know? Because if you have a good cinematography and you've casted right, it's the director is just keeping things in order, keeping things in line. I mean, you shouldn't be, and I've directed several movies, you don't have to really be to where you're telling anybody how to act. You can just give them certain hints. Like one of the things when I could give you precise, Don King got jumped by Demon in our movie. I mean, Don
Gibb. Yeah.
Don Gibb got jumped by Demon in our movie, and Don said to me, like, how do you want me to play it? And I go, well, and actors will ask you that a lot. And I said, I think the best thing that if you really got beat up by somebody and you're a world-class fighter, I think you would be embarrassed. So Don played that embarrassed, and all the direction to Demon would talk to me every time like he actually had a fight with a girl, and I told him the best way for him to act is not, like, you're fighting a girl, you wouldn't take it serious, you know, act like, you know, just do real strong moves and laugh at it, and, you know, because it couldn't really be a serious fight with a girl, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And the two comments I want to make about the film as well before I forget is I think it was one of the amazing things I thought was amazing about the film was y'all actually had cast a woman to be in the Kumite this time. And I just thought that was a genius idea.
Yeah, and I don't know if there was any part of that. You'd have to ask Frank, because we had a script by the same guy, and I'm sorry because this stuff was so long ago. I mean, I actually shot this in '94. That wrote Bloodsport 1, and the girl was actually in it by him. I don't know if there's any truth to that. You'd have to ask Frank. I never even talked to him about that, to be honest with you.
I will definitely have to ask Frank about that for sure. Sure. And also, there was another thing I wanted to mention about the film, but it has slipped my mind at the moment. I hate when that happens. I guess that means, Mike, I'm getting older, I guess.
So am I, so don't worry about it. We'll do the best we can.
Oh, absolutely. Like I always say, we'll wing it, you know. So.
Yeah.
So, but it was, like, in the film, was any, if you can remember, and if you can't, that's okay, but was any scenes cut or anything that you might want to keep in the film, or?
Well, I could tell you that during the film that, and this, I have the right to my opinion, so I mean, I can't be wrong for my opinion, is that Daniel Bernhardt was getting hurt throughout the film, and in fact, it hurt my relationship with him because I was trying to keep the film on schedule, and I basically told the people, look, this guy's a punk. We can't wait around not filming fight scenes better because he's hurt. Like, I mean, he would just say, I'm hurt in the middle of the production. Like, everybody could sit around, and it was bad enough having very little money to shoot the film, and then having an actor who was acting like he was hurt throughout the film. So I would say, actually, we did a lot in editing to protect him, but we could have done a lot better fight scenes with him if he wasn't like my leg hurts or my arm, or, you know what I mean, going through like, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, my opinion is too, man. If you're going to do a martial arts film, you should expect to do some physical stuff. You know?
You're going to expect that you're going to, if you get injured, you're going to have to keep going because you know, like you can't have 60 people waiting for one guy who doesn't think his leg's perfect or whatever. You know, different situations like that hurt. And by the way, we can never escape what you first brought up, that if Frank Dukes and Van Damme would have stayed together and completed this franchise, instead of Van Damme trying to run away with it by himself, that would have been a great franchise, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, because like we were discussing last night, in my opinion, the third and especially the fourth one is horrible out of the franchise. I mean, they just... Yeah,
I agree with you. They're absolutely terrible. And you could argue, although I'm proud of the film we made, that the whole film, even number 2, that the whole franchise went downhill when it didn't have the two people that really made the franchise on board, you know, Frank and Van Damme, you know. And that was, and to me, it would have been easy to get Frank on board because try paying him, you know, and Van Damme, like it got to him to where, as much as that title meant to his life, he wasn't willing to work under the constraints of a title. He thought he was bigger than the title, and the Quest proved he wasn't. Because if he would have been involved with Bloodsport 2, there's no doubt in my mind it would have been the biggest movie of his life.
Absolutely, because I strongly believe that it could have been even better than the first one if you know, things was done correctly. You know.
Oh yeah, because the first one you could. Yeah, I agree.
Because I mean, they could have done so much with the story to continue it. They could have done so much with it.
Yeah, and by the way, I ran into a lot of people in our movie went over and got jobs on Van Damme's movie, The Quest, because they're filming pretty close at the same time. And Van Damme should have known. He goes, I love that title. Please have it wait for me. What he's trying to do is get the owners of the title to wait to where he did a movie like it in front of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, because I remember the whole lawsuit deal between him and Dukes and stuff with that, and I think that's what, you know, turned me a little bit bitter against Van Damme for a couple of years, because I was like, how can he do this, you know?
Well, it's like if you follow the Eagles of Hollywood, it's pretty easy for people to, you know, want to seize power and control over pictures. That's what the whole business is about, is you're dealing with people that are very personal and, you know, only under extremely good conditions are really willing to team up with people, you know. And once you have a successful formula like they did, him and Frank, you know, it's almost like a good basketball or baseball team. You got to decide that we have something working, why fix it? But Van Damme's Eagles, in fact, I know the lawyer that broke a bunch of his contracts, that he had contracts with other people, and his ego got in the way of keeping that franchise together, where he made the Quest and thought that, you know, it would be something it wasn't, you know.
Absolutely. It's like for years I've had this vision that I'm finally getting to do. It's like I've wanted to talk with people from, Bloodsport and Kickboxer to get the backstories like I'm doing today, because with the DVDs you don't get a lot of extra features.
Yeah, the stuff they have today would have been interesting at that time. I could tell you a couple things that happened. As I actually had a studio. It was called Desert Road Center of the Arts, and I invited Frank and his team to go put an exhibition out there. Mm-hmm. And one of the things he did was he used to have a bit he did where you put 15 or 16 people on one side of a rope and he'd be on the other side. Mm-hmm. And I actually saw him fighting the people on the rope with one hand while he was talking to me.
Wow. That's amazing, and I can.
And I've had him personally, So even if you go as far to say he had two hands on it, say he had two hands on a rope, and how many people were on the other side? I mean, they couldn't pull him over.
Wow.
And I've also had him do, like, I'm eating with a fork. You know how forks are. And Denny's, and he chopped them, and he chopped the top of the fork off. I go, how in the heck did you do that? And he goes, I want to see that again. So he actually broke 3 or 4 forks in front of me, which is kind of hard to imagine how you do that.
Yeah.
Just look at a fork and think about breaking it in two with the karate chop, and I witnessed that. And, he sparred people that came into the gym blindfolded. It's almost like if you have a personal relationship with somebody, there's certain stories that you personally know, and there's not a darn thing you can do about them, and it doesn't matter who believes them, you saw them. It's like it's somebody that got a miracle from God and had a personal relationship with them. He could go, well, I mean, I'm the only one that knows the story, but I know this is true. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I mean, it just amazes me, these people online that, discredit Frank and say this and that, but I've seen evidence and I've seen proof that it did happen, and Well,
see, I think that as much as I think that's great, I think it's totally irrelevant to his story for the reason that I don't feel that anybody looked for the truth. And again, like I'll just say the Bruce Lee story. Nobody looked as if that was true. And Tom, the Billy Jack story, it's a legendary story. And to me, the fact that you did a legendary thing that, by the way, made the whole martial arts field in each case, all kinds of new studios popping up all over the place. So why waste all your time searching for the truth on something when you could just say, I love this story and I was inspired by it? And I mean, it'd be like trying to look at you can look at the movie American Hustle, which just came out, and say which part of it was true and which isn't, and all that stuff. And Captain Phillips and all these movies, we don't know if the truth is on the film, and I don't even think it's our job to figure out what the story is. If it brought inspiration to our life, why not just hold on to a legend and say at least it's a legendary picture, at least Frank's a legendary figure? Why does he have to be more than Bruce Lee was legendary too? In other words, people hooked into his legend for reasons we'll never know or never be able to figure out, and it's unimportant to me what was true in the Bruce Lee story,
Absolutely, and I wanted to make up a great point too, Mike, and I'll get your take on it too. A lot of people will debate this and disagree with this, but if it wasn't for Bloodsport, we would probably not have a UFC or MMA. I mean, where do you think it came from,
Yeah, it of course came from, it of course came out of the mind of Frank Dukes.
Oh, absolutely, but, a lot of people want to dispute that, but
See, what I've told Frank, and I've had several conversations on him, Frank's in his 60s. And I said, and Muhammad Ali's 68, 69, 70, whatever he is. I don't think that fighters have to continue to prove. I mean, do you imagine choosing off Muhammad Ali?
Wow.
Does Muhammad Ali have to show he could box in his older age? I mean, I don't think Frank having to show people anything at his age is relevant or irrelevant anymore. What I think the best thing about the stories that became legendary, and the legend's good enough. I mean, the people that want to talk about truth in movies and what did you hedge, what didn't you hedge, and maybe there was stuff more powerful that was never told. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. And if a movie wasn't redone or something like, I would at least love to see some sort of Bloodsport reunion or gathering. That would be great.
Yeah, I think that if the whole team could figure out how to get together and realize that it mattered when they were all together, and nothing mattered after that. You know, it's something me and Frank discussed and are trying to, so we'll see if that happens sometime this year or sometime in the future, but it's definitely something that should happen. Van Damme's career has gone far enough to where he doesn't matter, to where that particular film could make him matter again.
Absolutely. And I wanted to share a comment that Frank told me when I first met him. He actually said this to me, Mike. He said, "You know more about Bloodsport than I do." And I just laughed. I was like, how is that even possible? So.
Well, it's like in a way, I mean, when you do a story, almost anybody that studied the story would know more than you, because you were just doing it to hook together the story at the beginning, middle, and end to where it flowed properly. And where a fan would go, I love this word for word, and you start thinking, were those the final words and stuff like that. Like I tell you, there's a lot of it that I don't remember. What I remember the most was going to Thailand with very little money and very little money to make a film. And if you talk to the guy that financed it, Alan Moretz, he probably wouldn't ever admit that.
Wow, that's amazing.
I mean, we had our equipment. The Thais tied the equipment up at the airport to where we couldn't use any of the equipment we shipped in. They kind of extorted us into using their equipment. I mean, there's all kinds of games and all kinds of behind the scenes. The guy hated this guy I was working with named Mike Myers, who, I can understand why he disliked him, but it's really, it's hard to make a good movie no matter what anybody thinks. And one of the magics of making a good movie is a team that has chemistry together, even if they don't get along, which Frank and Van Damme obviously had, or you couldn't have that great movie.
Oh, absolutely. Now the prison cells where Alex Cardo was held, was that actual prison cells, or?
No, we made that. That was actually art scenes. We made the prisons.
Okay, because I thought
they're underneath, and the outside where we shot the outside prison was actually in a rice field in Thailand.
Wow,
and where we made the prison cells was actually in a building in Thailand.
Wow. Now, how were y'all able to acquire Pat Morita from the Karate Kid series? I thought that was genius, actually.
We called up as we had. When you're in movies, you have ways to get to almost anybody's agent. We called up his agent, and he was interested in doing it. And, we paid him a price, and he came out there, and he did a great job. He's really, if you watch some of the scenes where he was serious in, there's one scene when he was describing how important the kumite was and how important the sword was, that you could feel the power of Pat Morita, unlike a lot of things he's ever done in his life. I was like, he goes, there's a life, there's a power. And the way he was pitching it gave me chills even watching it,
Oh, absolutely, because I just, it gave me chills when he says, the sword is to be awarded to the greatest fighter on earth, and he says, find your previous partner and get the sword back, and that's your price for your freedom. And
actually, we filmed something that didn't make the film where he passed, since I was the only guy in the beginning, middle, and end of the film, and Pat Moretta, we actually filmed him at the start of the film. We actually had a scene, thinking about what you said, where he passed the sword to me, and I passed the sword to Daniel. And that wasn't put in the movie because I felt it was irrelevant that that I got the sword from Pat Morita and passed it. By the way, I still have that sword.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
That's amazing. And I gotta say too, one of the small things that people might overlook about this film, I did like how y'all put in there where Alex Cardell had to earn his invitation, but y'all kind of did it in a funny way. Y'all had a fighter that couldn't really fight that well, and Don Gibbs says, you want to keep your invitation, all you got to do is whip Alex, and he thinks he's big and bad, gonna whip Alex, and he gets knocked out and takes his invitation.
You know that was the same guy that fought the girl later on and got beat up by him?
Wow, really?
Yeah, the guy that got punched out early in the movie came back dressed in makeup like a clown.
Oh, so that I didn't even know that. That's something that I didn't even realize.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. Wow.
And there's also, and I wish I could be better at thinking the name, but the black guy in the movie was so good and so fast, we had to film him, we had to slow him down, or we really wouldn't have saw him on film. His name was Hall, his last name. And I've always told that. He thanked me several times for saying how good he was, but he was a tremendous martial artist. And one of the guys that fought Daniel, the second to last fight, was the guy that ended up filling in for Brandon Lee on The Crow when Brandon Lee died. He did all the remaining scenes because he was more or less a lookalike.
Wow, that's amazing. And I thought the part where one of the fighters lose and ends up almost getting in a fight with Donald Gibb, I thought that was genius too.
Yeah, and another thing that happened that you might be interesting if you go look back at it is there's two Thai guys that fought. That was actually a Thai film. You'll be able to see it. Two Thai kickboxers that actually just filmed them fighting.
Oh yeah, that was amazing too. Yeah, that was.
So that's kind of a little bit of the insight. Other than there was such a heavy spirit over that film, I could tell you. And I think a lot of it had to do with going back to your original thing, Frank and Van Damme not being involved. That really in my whole life, and I've filmed a lot of films, and in my whole life, I've never had a more miserable time filming a film because the money wasn't ready. We're in the middle of Thailand. We actually got thrown out of the country.
Wow, really?
Yeah, because I had personal friends over in Thailand that told us, what the guy goes, you could use, and he's a powerful guy in Thailand. They picked us up at the airport. We didn't go through customs or nothing. And he said one of the things he wanted for us, and he was giving us several locations, was an exotic bird. So this Alan Merez, when we left and came home, he goes, what is this guy talking about? I'm not buying him an exotic bird. So when we got back to Thailand and we didn't have what we said we were going to, I go, you don't know the Thais. You can't not just say you're not going to give the guy what he wants and go shoot in this country. It's no problem. So he decided that he'd be Alan Merez, the guy he was, and we actually got the whole group of us kicked out. And we went to Singapore and had to reapply for passports. And if you can imagine 40 people doing this and come back to Thailand.
Wow, that's amazing. I just wanted to ask you this question because I'm curious. What do you think of the Ninja Turtles franchise? Because I do know that I think in June a remake is going to be coming out in June, and I think Michael Bay is the director.
Oh, I think it'll be great. You have a good director in it. You have a good franchise for kids. You know, kids enjoy watching that, and God bless them. You know, let's hope for the best, that it inspires a lot of young people, and you know, makes the youth interested in. Number one, you have to respect how dangerous with real good guys in karate, how karate is. That's one of the reasons I didn't want the Power Ranger guy directing it. And so you should have almost a reverence to the real guys that actually really know what they're doing and are really good. And number two, you should also leave a little room for somebody that'll never be good at it, but it'll improve his life by exercising and getting in shape, and you know, maybe it'll help him protect himself the one time in his life he needed it.
Oh, absolutely. Now, doing Bloodsport 2, what was the most challenging or hardest thing to do you think?
Yeah, like I said, the most challenging is the guy really came with very little money, you know, and we were on the set literally with 200 extras for the crowd that wanted to get paid every day, and this guy wasn't paying them, and, you know, I mean, we could have really gotten a lot of trouble over in Thailand. So in that way, and a person almost dropped dead on the set because it was really hot. It was like, I don't know, 110, and it's humid. You can't even imagine the humidity. And, you know, it was like grueling on the set. It was grueling hours, grueling everything. Like I said, the guy that was supposed to direct the movie didn't even show up, and we directed in a way by committee. The guy, well, the funny thing was that Don Gibb said, you know, we should actually get Alan holding you know, those things that go on the road that look like a microphone, and at least take a picture of him to at least act like he's directing.
Wow, yeah, like I forget what they call them, but they're like cones. Yeah, that's in the road. Yeah.
So, I mean, that was really challenging because you had a cinematographer too, who, you know, was pissed off because we had a director that never showed up. And like I said, I directed a lot of the movie, and I actually, Don Gibb, I asked him, what haven't you done in show business? And he goes, I'd like to direct. And I go, why don't you direct tomorrow? He goes, really? And I go, absolutely. So it's funny, he told the cameraman, like, I really need you to help me out because I'm going to direct. And the cameraman said, like, you know, let's say used an FU on him, right? And Don Gibb strangled the guy out right in the restaurant. That's a pretty funny thing that happened on the set.
That's funny.
He literally choked his brains out because. And by the way, we had 2 cameras on it. This will interest you. And that the one cameraman, we used very few of his scenes, and I won't say his name because, but we used very few of his scenes, and he was supposed to be the A cameraman because he shot it to screw up the movie because he was so pissed off that he had a director that didn't show up, that he didn't have shot lists, and if we wouldn't have 2 cameras on it, he would have wasted all the footage of the movie.
Wow. Now
that's how much he hated Alan. So there's a lot of hate going on in that movie, and I could tell you, I really will go back that you had a franchise that really didn't want to go on without the 2 guys that made the franchise. There's all kinds of spiritual and stuff on the set that it was really I mean, it made me hate films for a long time. I had trouble making a film after that for 3 or 4 years, you know?
Wow, really? Wow. That was going to be my next question, Mike. I was going to have you tell my listeners, you know, what you're doing now since Bloodsport 2. So.
I worked a lot I'm doing, like I told you, The Secret Weapon, which is a documentary about Frank Dukes. I also did a bunch of filming on A.C. Green, who's a Laker. It's a role player. And, in fact, anybody could look up my resume on Goliath Film and Media Holding.com, and you could look up and it'll say, they have my resume online as one of the important people to their stock, you know what I mean? And it says everything I've done. I've done quite substantial amount of work,
Absolutely. And I wanted to ask you this too. What is your expectations for 2014? I mean, because obviously you have accomplished a lot, Mike. So.
Well, I do have expectations of working with Frank, finishing up the documentary we're doing a movie or two together with him as a collaboration. I also have a film I'm going to do that's involved with the sex slave industry. And I'm finishing up a lot of stuff because I went through like you told me about your brother. I went through my mom's death and another person close to me with that had a very bad thing that required surgery, and so we went through some stuff to where this year I'm ready to finish up. I have about 5 or 6 movies that need to be finished that'll be coming out this year. So those are what's kind of going on my slate.
Well, do you think any of these films will hit the theaters?
Yeah, I think all of them could have potential to go to the theater. The thing about a film is you actually have to be happy with the film. And some of these I started 3 or 4 years ago and haven't put out because I'm just now becoming happy with them. And I think it correlates with my mom's death in 2010, kind of threw me off for a few years, even though I didn't know it, It's the kind of thing that could happen subconsciously. And in the meantime, I went through a situation where I saw somebody really lousy at something, and I thought, wow, I would never want to be considered lousy at what I do like that. And it's kind of inspired me, and I grew because of that, And now I'm really ready because I know my calling's to make films, I know I'm good at it, and as far as in the low budget area, it's really good at it.
In some ways, Mike, I can relate because, I have a disease called cerebral palsy, and when I couldn't do something other kids would do, I would watch Bloodsport and Kickboxer. So, and actually, what's funny is people used to make fun of me in school because I watched those films every day of my life. But to me, it's part of my purpose because look at where I'm at today.
Right, and it's what inspired you, and everybody can go back. If we're fair with our life, we could go back to the moments that inspired us, and also the ones that might have led us to wrong decisions. And the fact, and I'm glad that and that movie inspired me too. It inspired me to drive into town, meet Frank, introduce myself to him, and say I want to be involved in the Bloodsport franchise. And I ended up in the Bloodsport franchise, which I believe was cursed, honestly, not like really was a curse on it after Frank and Van Damme didn't rejoin. Because like I said, there is such a bunch of spiritual stuff that you could only tell and feel if you're on the set. Because I've never seen a set where everything went wrong and still the movie didn't turn out too bad.
Oh, absolutely. It's like one of my main goals is, Mike, if there ever is a remake or, some sort of sequel or film that Frank's involved in with this, I definitely want to try to cast for it.
Yeah, and I'm sure, he was thinking that himself, or he probably wouldn't have had you call me,
Oh, absolutely, because, not only is Frank one of my heroes, but he's one of my closest friends and, you know, my martial arts instructor. So, I mean, it's just, it's amazing. Not everybody can say that they're, you know, friends with their idol or hero. So.
Yeah, and he's got a real niceness and pleasantness about him. And by the way, he makes a terrific great friend.
Oh, absolutely, Mike. And we can wrap this up anytime you like. I would just like to share a story with you, because I think you might get a kick out of it. When I first met Frank in 2009, he granted me a private autograph session, and you should have seen his face when I brought like a huge suitcase of nothing but Bloodsport and Frank Duke stuff. So.
Wow.
So, yeah. So he gave me the nickname the Duke's Collector. So.
Well, it's so interesting that you're that.
Oh, absolutely, Mike. And we can go ahead and wrap this up, my friend. Do you have any final thoughts for my audience, or?
Well, my final thoughts is, the movie Bloodsport is lucky to have you, and it's good, and I think God bless you to line you up with your hero, and I think that movie did a lot to inspire a lot of people, and like you said, inspired the UFC. All of that came right out of the mind of Frank Dukes. And there's so much that's come out of the mind of Frank Dukes that he hasn't got paid for or credit for, that it's good. It's good that, we all know that there was no such thing as a UFC before Bloodsport. And you can even ask all the people that are in the UFC. They all know about Bloodsport. So, in closing, I'll say it's a real pleasure talking to you. I hope I gave you, some stuff you can use. I'm glad that Frank inspired you, and when we do anything else to do with Bloodsport, I'll remember you, and we'll call you up and get you involved, okay?
Oh, absolutely, Mike, and I wanted to say real quick, Mike, thank you for your time, and at any time that you want to promote something else that you're doing, I hope that you will come back on the show, and I hope that you're, happy.
Where is the show, by the way, played on? What's it played on?
It's going to be on Blog Talk Radio, and it's going to be on iTunes as well. And I'm also going to stick it up on my YouTube channel. So. Oh,
okay.
So it's basically, Mike, it's going to be viral. It's going to be everywhere, my friend.
So you're gonna put the interview in all those places?
Oh yeah. So.
Oh, okay.
Well, it's gonna be everywhere possible, and like I said, Mike, just to me talking to you.
What is your Blog Talk Radio?
What is my Blog Talk Radio?
Is that the name of your?
It's J Ray Radio. J Ray Radio. I can email you a link. I don't know if you received my text message.
Yeah. In fact, I'll go and get a copy of that. Nice talking to you, and God bless you, and have a great day.
Absolutely, Mike, and thank you for being on the show, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you again soon.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
This is Mike Criscione saying hi to Justin Ray Harvey, an expert on Bloodsport, the movie. I'm a producer of Bloodsport, too. Thank you very much.